Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Glimmer Gang's Rise of the Floodborn set review. This time we are talking about Sapphire, and with me, I'm Spencer, and I have Blake.
Hello.
Blake. That's since my new hit single in the Ruby episode. That's your teaser right there. Alrighty. So, alrighty, with Sapphire, we get things strong with Alice Growing Girl, who's a 3-cost inkable 1/4 with 1 lore, legendary, with the abilities Good Advice, your other characters gain support, and What Did I Do? While this character has 10 strength or more, she gets +4 lore, putting her at a hefty 5. So this character is phenomenal. She is cheap. She's inkable. She has a very strong aura. I'm a huge fan of support. I was running way more Scepters of Arendelle in my Amber Sapphire deck than anyone would have recommended. But I love it. And while the +4 lore might be tempting, it's nice to have there as an option, but just her aura by herself makes her phenomenal. What are your thoughts, Blake?
I definitely agree. This is basically Belle from last set, but with a whole different idea built around her, where she has the ability to enable the secondary ability, which is getting to that 10 strength. But again, I agree. It's kind of the same thing as Belle, where the second ability is like uh, just kind of a win more thing. What you really want is that first ability to go off, and with her, with the support, there are so many other cards that are easier. Like in Emerald, you got Pain and Pete, who want 4 more attack. So having her on the board, enabling your other characters to get them to their next level, and just having support in general is great. I agree with you. I was with you with having the scepter. So having Gallus is going to be awesome, and I am sad I haven't pulled any so far.
Nor have I,
For
and I am also sad. Yeah, support's legit my favorite keyword, and I just love the value you get out of being able to quest and buff something, which basically like your character's almost questing and challenging with one action, which is great.
anything that lets you do things when you're advancing your win condition is just great. So support is awesome for that. But I guess we'll move on to our next card, Basil. We have a series of these. So Basil, Great Mouse Detective. This one is a 6-cost inkable 3/4 with 3 lore. He's a Floodborn hero detective with Shift 5. And the ability, there's always a chance. If you used Shift to play this character, you may draw 2 cards when he enters play. The main good thing with this is we do have several targets for him to shift onto. The main drawback that I see is that his shift only saves you 1 ink. And the ability, I feel like, is not quite strong enough to really want to run him overall. I feel like there are other characters that can shift earlier and do more awesome things. So I'm having some trouble finding a spot to put him.
Yeah, I think this is more one of those like Floodborn flavor cards that we got in this set. Uh, his stats and stuff. I mean, 3 lore is nice, but the rest of his stats aren't very great for his cost. And if you wanted to come out and shift and immediately quest, I mean, that's cool, but you could have done the same thing by playing a Maleficent Uninvited the turn before, and it has 2 more willpower. And like you said, his ability is just, it's not consistent enough to rely on, especially not compared to all of the other awesome draw things that Sapphire has gotten this set. So, Plus, when you're shifting, you're already giving up one card, and then you're playing one, so you actually only end up being like card advantage neutral. So I don't like this card, and his shift targets aren't good, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely playing him without shift is like the absolute worst play I've ever seen. 6 for 3/4
yeah,
is not great at all.
yeah, that would not be the play for sure. So talking about his shift targets, first up we have Basil of Baker Street, or if you want to call him Basil, it's all up to you. 2 cost inkable, 2/2 with 1 lore and support. So I've talked about how awesome support is. I appreciate it. So I don't hate this card, but 2 cost, 2/2. It's not that exciting.
Yeah, 2/2. Two is kind of a weird number for support. I think. I mean, it's definitely better than Hey Hey with one, but yeah, with the 2 willpower, he's not gonna be able to support for long. I think so. Maybe if he had one more willpower, I feel like he would be a little stronger. But um,
Yeah, a 2/2/3
yeah,
1 with support would be dope.
let's move on to our last Basil here. Basil, Perceptive Investigator. 4 cost inkable, 3/4 with 2 lore. So, a new Maleficent. uh, that's pretty much it. The only difference is he has Floodborn that he can shift to.
Do we really not have a Floodborn Maleficent yet?
We do not have a Floodborn
That's
Maleficent.
crazy. There's so many Maleficents.
Shocking, I know. But yeah, this is, I guess, the one you would want to play because you get to play it on curve 4 and then shift for 5. But you're only gaining 1 lore, I believe. That's the same stat line. Yep, exact same stat. So all you're getting from shifting is the ability and 1 lore. So that does not feel great.
For sure. All right. Next up, we have Caterpillar, Calm and Collected. Funny story. I didn't realize this card existed until I pulled it in a pack, and I was like, "What is this?" One, the art is dope, but then I'm actually pretty happy with these stats. It's a 3 cost inkable, 1/3 with 3 lore. Like, it's 3 cost. It's got 3 lore. That's already great. 1/3. I mean, it survives cannons and doesn't survive Smash, but I doubt Smash is getting run too much anymore. I guess stuff like that. Like, I think it's a good little aggro piece for sure.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the cards. Once I saw it, as I'm like, yeah, it's finding a spot in the turquoise high five deck. Uh,
Mm.
just great amount of having a yet another 3 lore quester at an even earlier stage of the game just feels awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
With that, we'll move on to another card I want to add to the high five. We have Cogsworth, Grandfather Clock, 5 cost inkable, 2/5 with 2 lore, Floodborn ally, shift 3, and ward, and the ability unwind. Your other characters gain resist +1. So, Sapphire getting resist, and the main weakness of the Sapphire Emerald deck was steal stuff, doing damage to everything, and this guy helps solve that problem. So I feel like he's going to see a lot of play in that deck in particular, and maybe in general, just having resist on the board, and he has ward, so unless you quest with them, he's pretty safe.
Yeah, this card's awesome. It's a really valuable aura, and then just the fact that he has ward just takes him over the top into just ridiculous levels. Absolutely. And now to talk about what we're shifting Grandfather Cogsworth on top of, we have Cogsworth Talking Clock. 2 cost inkable, 2/3/1 with the ability, wait a minute, your characters with Reckless gain 1 lore. One, it's just a solid vanilla, like 2/3/1, like stat line, and he just has this ability for free on top of it, which is pretty cool. It's kind of a very techy card, but giving your reckless characters the ability to do something other than challenge is pretty sweet. And he's a good shift target for a really valuable card. So I think all in all, this is a pretty solid little card. He'll see some play for sure.
I think for right now, he'll mainly be played just to have the shift target for Grandfather Clock, but it'll be interesting if we see some sort of reckless deck that comes into play later down the line.
Yeah, I think he's like better off as like a tech piece, just like counter, Emerald giving your stuff reckless. But I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to try to like turn him into an archetype or something.
Yeah, definitely more of a tech piece for now. But I think right now Emerald is mainly going to be focused on like discard and stuff. So I'm not sure if we'll see a lot of the Beast is Mine or John Silver's uh, for this rotation at least.
John Silver's still a great card. People still sleeping on him.
Oh, I'm not going to argue with that. He is pretty solid, and I have seen him win games, so no arguing with that. Okay. Corella DeVille, fashionable cruiser, 2 cost inkable, 3/2, with the ability now get going. During your turn, this character gains evasive, and she also has 1 lore. So solid tech option to counter enemy evasives and even to counter like Amber Simbas with that 3 attack. I feel like she's at least going to be played in a good number of Sapphire decks just as a nice little tech option for the early game.
Yeah, I mean one of Sapphire's biggest weaknesses is not having good early game presence, and Corella really helps with that. Not only being able to deal with those 2 3s, but also hit above her weight class, into some 3 costs and even 4 costs, and then also just having that ability to challenge evasives and take out like the new mini and pongos and things like that on top of it, as well as with all the support that's prevalent in Sapphire, she could take out any evasive character. I think she's gonna see some play just for that, how flexible she is. Alrighty, and on top of that, she is also a shift target for our next card, Cruella Deville Perfectly Wretched, a 5 cost inkable 4/3 with 2 lore, shift 3, and oh no you don't. Whenever this character quests, chosen opposing character gets -2 strength this turn. Now, this is obviously just a much worse version of the Amber Queen Floodborn card, but this one's in Sapphire, and it's still a valuable ability, especially with, how easy it is to give things support in Sapphire, which is why I think this card may be less powerful, because if you give this thing support, then it also gives something +4 strength, without having to relegate that specifically to a another color combo. So I think this card's pretty good. If you want that ability, and you'd want to be running a color combo that isn't Amber Sapphire, then you've got that option.
Still don't really see a lot of combos and stuff other than protecting your own stuff with reducing the attack, but I still don't see that getting play a lot. So we'll see. We are starting to see cards like we saw in Ruby with Radigan caring about characters that only had like 3 strength. So maybe we'll start seeing combos with that where you want to get your opponent's stuff to a certain amount of strength so you can do certain things with them. But yeah, we'll see if she sees play. I feel like she's okay to play. Kind of like a budget queen option if you don't have the queen, but she's in the starter deck, so
Fair.
should be pretty easy to get a hold of. But yeah. All right, moving on to Duke Weaselton, small time crook. 2 cost inkable, 1/2 with 2 lore and ward. If you're really going for a ward heavy deck, I guess you'll slot him in. Just has the same sort of weakness as a lot of other ward characters where they don't have that big of a stat line. So whenever they are challenged, they're taken care of pretty easily usually. So yeah, but ward and he gets to quest for two. So late game, unless your opponent has something to take care of him, could finish out the game for you.
All right, next up we have Gaston, Intellectual Powerhouse. I know the card from the starter deck. 6 cost, uninkable, 4/4 with 3 lore, shift 4, and developed brain. When you play this character, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may put 1 into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. I'm not a huge fan of this card, simply because it's uninkable and it's expensive. And you could basically get the same effect with a 1 cost develop your brain and have other more valuable characters on the field. Like you could play for the same 6 cost, you could play a Maleficent Uninvited and a develop your brain in the same turn. This thing can shift. Shifting on top of the Ruby Gaston, I think, is not really what the intention is. I think the 3 cost Singer 5 Gaston in Amber is a much better target, and we don't have a Sapphire Gaston. So maybe if we get something cool, cool Sapphire Gaston in the future, I might reevaluate that. But I don't. There's just so much good draw in Sapphire and other colors now that I think that you don't need to risk it with this guy.
And even other Floodborn characters now, you get to pop off their effects multiple times, like the Floodborn Queen of Hearts. You get to draw with every challenge, and this feels just so much weaker compared to that. Definitely needs a better target. I will say there's also a Gaston in Emerald. I believe that is also 3 cost, but even in that color combo, I don't think this really has a place there.
Hmm. I could see an Emerald just because Emerald doesn't have as much draw unless you're running the discard package.
All right. So next up is Grand Pabby, oldest and wisest. 7 cost, uninkable, 3/6 with 3 lore, and the ability Ancient Insight. Whenever you remove 1 or more damage from one of your characters, gain 2 lore. This guy is a build around, and everyone, once they saw this card, they were theory crafting whichever way they could get this guy to go off as often as possible. And a lot of those options are already in Sapphire. And I, I think you don't really even have to do Amber, because Sapphire does have a lot of good healing options, especially from this set now.
Yeah, I think the best bet actually is Ruby to combine with him, just because you're able to damage your own stuff and you've got stuff that comes into play damaged, and Sapphire has plenty of healing already. The other really good option is Steel, because Steel can also damage its own characters if you need to, as well as just being a really good board presence and being able to deal with your opponent's stuff as well. So I think Ruby and Steel are like really your best options for Grand Pappy. All right, moving on to one of my favorite cards and one that is taking the Lorcana world by storm, Hiram Flaversham, Toymaker. 4 cost, inkable, 1/6 with 1 lore, and the ability Artificer. When you play this card, and whenever he quests, you may banish one of your items to draw 2 cards. Now, it might sound like it's a bit of a detriment, although drawing 2 cards it is always a nice thing. But with popsicles, as well as some other cheap items and items that you might not want to care too much about staying on the field, you have a absolutely ridiculous draw engine going on here. I mean, if you play a popsicle, it replaces itself. So, and then when you destroy it, so you're at neutral card advantage. You didn't really lose anything. Then you gain 2 cards, so you're up 2. Then, if he survives into the next turn, which is very likely, unless your opponent, uses a some kind of removal like a dragonfire or something, then you get to do it again, which is awesome. So the amount of cards that this card lets you draw is absolutely insane. He's such a good draw engine, and there's so many cards that are supporting him in this set, that it's Sapphire's biggest issue, which was draw, and flipped it fully. Sapphire doesn't have issues with draw anymore because of this card and
Yeah,
Popsicle.
yeah. Solves the issues with draw and also brings items into the fold, really. Because who knew that destroying your own items was going to be what it would take to bring items to be in the decks?
For sure.
All right, let's move on to James, role model. 4 cost, uninkable, 3/3 with 2 lore, with the ability Never Ever Lose Sight. When this character is banished, you may put this card in your inkwell face down and exerted. So, Lorcana seems to have this trend where all the parents and grandparents that pass away have this ability. I'm waiting for the Mufasa that will have this ability. But for this one in particular, I feel like it comes too late. Ramp, you usually want to do as early as possible, and doing this on turn 4 or turn 3 if you're ramping, I guess, still just feels too late. And he's uninkable, where Grandma Tala is inkable, so I'm not sure he'll find a spot in the ramp deck.
Yeah, unless we get something that, triggers off of your cards getting turned into ink, I don't think he'll see play. We're kind of spoiled for choice right now in terms of ramping options for Sapphire, and they're only just going to keep getting more and more because that's one of Sapphire's identities. So I don't think this card is going to really see any play outside of limited. Limited's a pretty good card.
Very true.
All right, so following up, James is Jasmine, heir of Agrabah. 1 cost inkable, 1/2 with 1 lore, and when you play this character, remove up to 1 damage from chosen character of yours. Not particularly great. It's basically just Timon in Sapphire, but the difference is that Sapphire has Grand Poppy and Floodborn Jasmine, which actually now has a viable shift target, which is this card. So I think that this card might see play just for those reasons alone.
Yeah, especially once we learn that Jasmine ability pops off Grandpappy multiple times. Everyone was wanting a cheap shift target for the Floodborn Jasmine, and now we got her. Next card, we have Judy Hopps, Optimistic Officer, who is a 3 cost inkable, 2/3 with 2 lore, and the ability Don't Call Me Cute. When you play this character, you may banish chosen item. Its player draws a card. This is a pretty solid card, I think. Outside of break, I think this is the earliest that we can break an opponent's item, which I know you're giving them draw, but for some decks that rely on their items to give them some crazy advantages, you may want to do that sometimes. And doing it to your own items, you get to draw. So another way to take advantage of those cheap items early on and get some extra benefit out of them. Pretty flexible. I think she's going to see a lot of play in Sapphire.
Yeah, she's real versatile, like you said. She's basically, you can either treat her as a budget Hiram and blow up your own stuff to draw some cards, or like you said, if you need to take out any of your opponent's high value items, like spell books are going to be a really good choice for that, going forward, and weight sets and yeah, all the usual purple stuff that people hate, the White Rabbit's pocketbook and all that kind of stuff. It gives you that option. But yeah, she's a real good support for the item draw engine for sure, and giving you a little bit of extra flexibility on top of that. And she quests for two, which is nice. All right, then we have Ms. Judson Housekeeper, who is a 4 cost uninkable 1/5 with 2 lore and the ability Tidy Up. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, you may put the top card of your deck into your inkwell face down and exerted. I'm not particularly a big fan of this card. One, just because she's slow when it comes to ramping, and then at the same time, it's the top deck ramp, which now that we're getting as much draw as we have in Sapphire, I think we're going to see the cards that ink directly from your hand gain a lot more value versus the top of the deck, just because you have that control and you're not potentially inking something that you don't want to ink.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that she doesn't come out until 4 ink, I feel is a bit too late. If she was like Bucky and came out on turn 2 um, to set up early and gain benefit potentially a little earlier, I think that would have made her a bit more playable. But at 4 ink, I don't think she's going to see much play, if at all. I think she's probably the weakest of the Floodborn Matters cards.
I would agree.
But let's get back to this draw engine that we keep talking about with Nick Wild, Wily Fox. 4 cost inkable, 2/4 with 2 lore, and it's called a hustle. When you play this character, you may return an item card named Popsicle from your discard to your hand. You'll get to see why Popsicle is so crazy once we get to it, but getting Popsicle back is really good.
Yeah. Especially in combination with Hiram. Like, if you're able to get a popsicle out like turn 1, and then drop your Flaversham on turn 4, and then blow up the popsicle, draw your 2 cards, then you drop Nick Wild on turn 5, and then draw your popsicle, which, spoiler, costs 1. Then you drop the popsicle, then you quest with Hiram, blow up the popsicle. You've drawn another 3 cards. It's crazy. And his stat line isn't bad. He gives up 1 strength from a vanilla, so it's whatever. He can still quest for 2, and it's got 4 willpower, so it's gonna take a little bit of effort to get rid of him.
Yeah.
All right, and then I have no idea how to pronounce this name. Do you, Blake?
Noi.
Noi? Okay. Noi, Orphaned Thief. 2 cost inkable, 1/2 with 2 lore. Hide and seek. While you have an item in play, this character gains resist +1 and ward. With the item stuff that we have going on, having this card be able to be cheap and quest for 2 and have some really useful keywords, I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all.
Yeah, definitely goes into the item decks because more than likely you're playing Popsicle or some other item on one, and you'll definitely be able to have that resist ward, which will help her tough out some hits, which normally these 4 characters have a tough time doing. So, yeah, she's a solid little character, I think.
Indeed.
All right, up next we have Flounder, Owl, Logical Lecturer, 1 cost inkable, 2/2.
1 lore.
It's a new Flounder.
Moving on to Prince Charming, heir to the throne. 4 cost inkable, 3/3, 3 lore. He is a Sapphire Hans. Moving on.
Next up is Rabbit, Reluctant Host, 5 cost inkable, 4/6 with 2 lore.
Play Maleficent uninvited instead.
The 1 strength is not worse.
1 lore.
-1 lore, I think,
Yeah, no, not at
for
all.
sure.
All right. Now on to something that is exciting. Sisu Divine Water Dragon. 4 cost, uninkable, 2/4 with 2 lore, and the ability I Trust You. Whenever this character quests, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You may put one into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So if you're not wanting to run the Hiram item draw engine, and you can draw some Sisus because I can't, then you've got Sisu, who is a repeatable develop your brain on a stick, which is pretty cool. I would play her over Gaston all day, every day.
I was lucky enough to pull two of these so far, so I feel like I'm going to have to play her at some point in some way. So I'll let you know how she does.
Her enchanted is also beautiful.
Oh, yeah, very beautiful enchanted. All right. Next up, we have the Knock Water Spirit. 4 cost inkable, 4/3 with 1 lore and ward. Solid in draft, I guess.
So Winnie the Pooh having a think. 3 cost, inkable, 2/3 with 2 lore, and the ability Honeypot. Whenever this character quests, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down. Now, we have gotten a ruling that this works like Fishbone Quill, so you can put any card from your hand, and you do not have to reveal it to your opponent. Overall, I think this is a really good card.
I've had debates with people in the Discord about uh, this versus Mickey Mouse and dropping a card from the top of your deck or from your hand. And I think you hit it on the head when you say we have so much card advantage now. Inking from the hand does not feel as bad as it did in set one. So I definitely think Winnie the Pooh, especially with being inkable, will probably see play over Detective Mickey now.
Yeah. The fact that he quests for 2, it's really nice.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that extra lore always helps.
Yeah. And especially if people are like trying to do the whole like steal Tiana slash Beast Mirror thing where you want to empty your hand out. Pooh's your boy.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh wow, we made it to the actions and stuff already. Kind of sped through that last little bit.
Sapphire was much more exciting to talk about than Ruby.
Falling down the rabbit hole. 4 cost uninkable action. Each player chooses one of their characters and puts them into their inkwell face down and exerted. So, a very weird form of ramp slash removal. I've been having trouble putting my brain around it. It does get around some things like ward, uh, because your opponent is choosing the character that they're putting in. But because of that, I feel like this only sees play in like a very control-y deck where you're trying to force that decision for your opponent. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head there of where it's if you're playing like a control deck and you're expecting to be able to keep your opponent at only, one character or so, then it's valuable. If not, then you're better off just playing Let It Go.
Yeah, and let it go. It's inkable. Yeah.
And you can sing it.
Yep.
Speaking of singing, we have our first song of the set, which is 4 Dozen Eggs, a 4 cost inkable song. Your characters gain resist +2 until the start of your next turn. Now, this does only affect the characters that are on the board when you play the song. Um, we have gotten that ruling, and it's expensive, but the ability is really good. Resist +2 is pretty strong, and especially with Sapphire, where you're wanting to quest a lot and you don't have a lot of clapback potential, being able to survive or at least force your opponent to send multiple things into something to get rid of it is pretty valuable, in my opinion. I don't know how much play this is going to see, but I think it has potential.
I definitely think so too. Because at the starter event that I went to, this card would sometimes just flat out win games because you would just play it down on your field and your opponent wouldn't be able to do anything about that board state. And with everything that quested, it, and staying alive and being able to survive and quest till next turn, it spelled the end of the game.
Yeah,
Of course, that was only starter deck, so we'll have to see if that gets to play out in constructed. But I feel like there's some deck somewhere that can set this up to where you. I'm also thinking of like an immortal Cinderella Stouthearted, where you sing this, play this, or sing this. She has resist +4 and gets to attack whatever your opponent has on the field. Is solid on its own too.
yeah, for sure. And then, yeah, I think in limited, this is going to be a super, super strong card because there's not as much good removal in this set as opposed to set one. Like, you don't have Dragonfires and Let It Goes and stuff to to worry about, and so being able to prevent your opponent from
Yeah.
challenging effectively is going to be really, really good.
All right. So moving on to our next action, we have Launch, which is a 3 cost uninkable, which banish chosen item of yours to deal 5 damage to a chosen character. So it's a item deck's way to have some removal, I guess, but damage based removal. I feel like Let It Go will still sit comfortably in the item deck package as their removal option of choice,
Yeah.
especially if resist is as big of a thing in the meta.
Yeah, this being both uninkable and requiring you to sacrifice something, I don't like it. Also, like the art, like it trips me out because like the crossbow launcher thing is basically like they took a plasma blaster from Lilo and Stitch and attached it and turned it into a coconut launching cannon. Like you take like super alien technology of a laser beam gun and turn it into a coconut cannon. Like no, no. Okay, that's my rant.
Make it make sense,
Make it make
Maurice.
sense. Speaking of making it make sense, our next card is Nothing to Hide, a 1 cost inkable action. With the effect, each opponent reveals their hand. Draw a card. What? This card's bonkers. It replaces itself. It costs 1, and you get to see what cards your opponent has. All of your opponents if you're playing a multiplayer. This is crazy.
And this is why note taking isn't allowed, because in a multiplayer game, you would be sitting there for 5+ minutes writing down.
It is true. You're not wrong.
But yeah, this is definitely a constructed card because just knowing your opponent's hand and knowing how the next few turns are probably gonna go is pretty powerful in constructed formats, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, let's get into some items. Starting off with Fang Crossbow. 3 cost inkable, and this one has 2 abilities. First one is Careful Aim. Exert it and pay 2 ink. Chosen character gets -2 attack this turn. And then Stay Back. This exert this item and banish this item. Banish chosen dragon character. If there is an item that you play and you don't mind getting destroyed, I guess for launch, this is it. But what an inefficient way to use it.
Yeah, I don't hate the -2 strength bit, and if we get more dragons, we've already got some pretty strong ones that you might want to deal with. But yeah, it's a fun flavor techie card. I don't think it's that good.
Yeah, definitely more on the tech side for now because there are only like 3 or 4 dragon cards out there. So the later ability probably isn't going to go off too much unless there is very dragon heavy meta.
All right. Next up, we did not plan this, but I am excited that I get to talk about this one, gumbo pot. Just because I am from Louisiana, I love making me some gumbo. I like eating it even more. And the card's actually not bad. It's a 2 cost inkable item that has the ability the best I've ever tasted, which is exert, remove 1 damage each from up to 2 chosen characters. So obviously this is meant to combo with grandpappy or other healing matters abilities that want you to heal as many characters as possible. So exerting this and healing 1 damage on 2 characters gets you 4 lore if you have grandpappy on the field, which is pretty nice.
Yep, absolutely. Definitely one of those ones where you can put it down early and use it a few times to heal some things. And once it's uh, not being as effective anymore, uh, it, use Flaversham to draw 2 cards. I wouldn't feel too bad about that.
Fair.
Alrighty. So next up is a card that made a few people sad because it is an item, but it is also kind of a location. Maurice's Workshop. 3 cost uninkable with the ability looking for this. Whenever you play another item, you may pay 1 ink to draw a card. So, kind of like an altered Maurice effect, only Maurice got to draw the card for free. So, this one you have to pay 1 ink. I feel like with our other items, we get enough draw and the other card, so I'm not sure this will really have a place on top of that.
Yeah, I think this is just for if you just want to go really heavy on items and don't want to blow them up with Haversham. So if you're going like really hard on a Tamatoa build rather than like an aerial build, um, then you might want to go for this, especially if you're running like bells and Maurices themselves that reduce the cost of items. Then you're basically getting this for an extra draw for free, kind of, if you're reducing the cost of the item initially. So yeah, I don't know. All right, finally, we've gotten to the myth, the legend itself. Even though it's just a common, the popsicle. A 1 cost inkable item with the abilities Jumbo Pop. When you play this item, you may draw a card. So for 1 cost, it replaces itself. And then also, that's Redwood. Banish this item, remove up to 2 damage from chosen character. So not only does this work with your Healing Matters stuff, but also it's a phenomenal, cheap item that already draws you a card and replaces itself, has another card that brings it back to your hand, and you can blow it up with Hiram and draw some more cards. It's great.
And if your opponent is crazy enough to bounce this with Befuddle, you get to draw more cards later.
That's also true. That would be hilarious.
I mean, we've already talked about this whole engine, and this is the start of it all. So, as you can tell, this card is going to see play, and it's a common. So, everyone go grab your play sets. I mean, you get 3 of them in the starter deck, even.
Yeah,
So, all you need is a starter deck and to buy a single copy, or you'll probably get your copy in your booster pack. Like,
there's a good chance, yeah.
all you need is a starter deck, and you already have the basis of this engine.
Yeah. And starter comes with Flaversham as well. And some Nick Wilds. And Judy Hopps.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's got the whole engine just in the deck.
No,
No wilds?
no Nick
Oh,
Wilds
okay.
in the deck. No, no Wilds. But you do have a couple Judy Hops, and you do get one Flaversham
Okay.
because he is a rare. So they put one of him in. But still, you buy the starter deck, and you have this a good start to that engine. All right, our final item. Sardine Can, our one little hint at some rescuers action. 4 cost inkable with the ability Flight Cabin. Your exerted characters gain ward. I really don't know where this really fits. I guess the best spot I can think of it is with some high willpower questers that you quest with, and then you have this out, and your opponent has to try to find the strength in their characters in order to take out those high willpower questers.
I think this car is awesome if you're going for like a Sapphire Amber or Sapphire Steel deck that's, running bodyguards. Then you can just quest away and your opponent has to deal with the bodyguards first, especially, if you're talking steel and they've got resist, or if you're running 4 dozen eggs and you can give your whole board resist, like, cool, my whole board has resist to. Usually Sapphire stuff has pretty big willpowers, so have fun because you can't use any removal on them outside of the falling down the rabbit hole or Lady Tremaine or be prepared. I think those are the only three. Grab your swords.
Mhm.
But if you have resist from 4 dozen eggs, then grab your swords doesn't do anything. So
What does it take to beat a bunch of swords? 4 dozen eggs.
that's true. Yeah, I think this is just really good against like control decks, specifically like the Ruby Sapphire or the Ruby Amethyst decks, like outside of be prepared. If you're able to quest with something, then they have to come swinging at it. All right. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. That is going to wrap up our Sapphire set review. Stay tuned for Steel coming up next. And glimmer on and have a glimtastic day.